Hi, everyone. So I'm here with Breanna Giesbrecht. Breanna is a clinical counselor, has her master's degree in marriage and family therapy from Trinity Western University. She has been working with clients over the last 8 years, and Breanna runs her own private practice here in Abbotsford. Her husband, Jonathan, is a pastor at one of the pastors at Northview Church here in Abbotsford, and they have two children. So thanks for being here, Breanna. It's good having you
Yeah,
here.
thank you so much for having me. This is an honor, and I'm excited to be here.
Great. Well, let me begin with a few questions. The first question is, in your research, Breanna, or education and training, how do counselors define hope?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Um, I think that a specific and narrow definition is not agreed upon by all, but I think the one thing everyone would agree upon is this idea that hope is all about change and the possibility of change and the knowledge that we are wired for growth and that will always be a possibility and a reality that can take place. And I think that's the fundamental essence of what makes the therapeutic process possible is clinging to this idea of hope and that change can happen for people.
Mm. And why is hope so important? We read and hear hope is, we can't live without hope. But yeah, in your experience, why is hope so important?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that when I was processing this idea of hope and the integration of therapy, I realized that in our training, we often don't talk about hope so explicitly. And yet, ironically, hope is the fundamental essence of how you can sit with clients. And one of the first things we do when we're sitting with a client is ask them, on a scale of 1 to 10, where's your hope at? And if a client reports a lower level of hope, we often will say, is it okay if I hold some hope for you until you're able to hold it yourself? And I think the whole idea here is based on this idea of hope breeding hope, and how when we can hold it for someone, they can realize the possibility of change for themselves and begin to adopt it. Because when we don't have hope, our capacity for change and growth significantly decreases. So when you look at the research, when a clients have a high level of hope, their rate of growth and change and transformation in their personal lives and their external lives, like what's going on, even in those around them in their relationships, dramatically increases when they have a higher level of hope. And this is from the secular world point of view, talking about hope in this way. So from a Christian perspective, for me, it's cool to know that we can see the integration of how science is merging with what we already know about hope from a scriptural perspective.
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the brain has there's a lot of things going on with the
Yes,
brain as
yes.
well when it comes to hope. And are you able to share a little bit about that?
Absolutely, yep. So the cool thing, what we know about science in more recent years, I mean, we've known more of this for probably longer than some of us are more familiar with, but the brain is wired in such a way to constantly grow. It will never stop growing. It will never stop changing. So the word that is often used is the neuroplasticity of the brain, which is this whole idea that neurons that fire together wire together. So what's really cool is that the more we practice something, and this goes to whether you're looking at sports or whether you're looking at trying to cultivate a skill, we can create super neural highways in our brain the more we practice something. So this speaks to both our brokenness and how we can heal, because we can see how it can be hard to break old habits when we have a superneural highway in the brain. But the flip side is also true in that we have the possibility to actually change our thinking. And when we change our thinking, we will change, or we create more likelihood that we will change our behavior. Because when our brain is changed, now it's more likely that we will do something different because we are seeing things differently, we are thinking things differently. So from a scientific level, there is proof that hope and then the connection to change actually has an impact on how we move forward in the world and how we grow.
Yeah. Huh. Is hope always having to do with looking, is always looking towards the future? When you think about hope, is it always to deal
Yeah.
with something about the future, or is the past, does that come into play also?
It's interesting. I would say that from a therapeutic lens, it typically focuses on the future. Having said that, I don't think that it would negate the past, but I think specifically in therapeutic, from a therapeutic lens, what we do know about the brain is when the brain doesn't know the difference between a lived reality or an imagined one. So by that I mean this is where when you look at even the world of sports and visualization, there is actually truth in that when we can imagine another possibility, we can actually see our brain can start to create that new neural superhighway. And so when we have that, we can lean into it. So in our own quiet time, when we think about the possibilities of growth and almost like who we are made in Christ, and who we can be as He continues to do His work in us, even the act of doing that will help strengthen and cultivate our ability to move into those kind of characteristics with greater ease. Obviously, with the help of the Spirit and all that would be playing into it, but from a brain level, it also proves that as well.
Huh, interesting. Yeah. So, when in the message I was talking about hope, one of the meanings in the Old Testament is rope or cord. So holding on, we hold on to hope, we hold on
Yes.
to God. So, what can get in the way of holding on to hope?
Yeah. I think one of the things that can get in the way of holding on to hope or even cultivating hope is some of our misconceptions around maybe sometimes hope being connected with joy, and that in order to have hope, maybe you can't have another experience or you can't have another emotion at the same time. And the reality is our brains are capable of holding more than one thing. We can hold sadness and joy at the same time. We can hold lament and we can hold and hope at the same time. And so I think educating even ourselves on the realities that the emotions we're feeling, we can hold multiple ones at the same time. And I think sometimes what happens is we cut off from hope because we think, oh, I'm sad, so I can't have hope. Or we cut off from sadness because we think we need to have hope. When part of life is learning how to actually emotionally relate to all the emotions and hear what they're trying to say without letting them dictate and rule our lives, but just to listen to the message that they have to give. Because emotions in and of themselves are not wrong, they just are. It's the behaviors that they can lead to that become the problem, and the narratives that they tell that might not be true and might be destructive. Those are the problems. But when we can actually learn to hear the message of our emotions, Daniel Siegel, he's a brain scientist, and he has a phrase, name it to tame it. When we can name our emotions, we will tame their power. So the point is, the more we can become aware even of some of these other emotions that we have going on, and the more we can tame them, we will actually create like less emotional clutter, which will actually create more of a clearing to cultivate hope.
Interesting. Yeah. Very interesting.
It's pretty cool.
You're very knowledgeable. What are some practical ways to cultivate hope then?
I think, like I was just mentioning, learning more about our about really just about emotional wellness and what that means and how we can actually navigate when these emotions come, so that we understand what it looks like to hold both, so that we can say, like, for example, someone sitting with grief, it would be very inappropriate to run to them and be like, but you should smile and have hope and joy in the Lord. Well, they are capable of having sadness and deep grief and having a deep-seated hope and faith and joy in the Lord at the same time. But I think when we don't know that that's a possibility and we don't know how to recognize the messages that our emotions come, what happens is our emotions become like toddlers, and they are throwing these tantrums and they're getting bigger and bigger, and they're distracting us from actually being able to cultivate cultivate hope. So one, just knowing and learning about ourselves in that way, and learning to listen. What does my sadness want me to know right now? Oh, it's a global pandemic. It actually would make sense that I'm grieving right now because there's a lot of losses that have gone on. I wasn't able to have my grandparents in the room when my baby was born, or maybe I wasn't able to have the wedding I dreamed of. Being able to hear what the sadness wants will then dissipate its power, so that we can be able to hold both. We can actually be able to say, that was sad, and I'm so thankful for these things. So then that would lead to the second thing, is I think there is absolutely validity in talking about like a gratitude journal, of actually making it a practice to daily think of 5 things to be thankful for, whether it's the aesthetics of a room or the beauty of nature or friends and family in our lives. Whatever it is, that is actually strengthening that neural pathway. It's like strengthening the hope neural highway in our brains. So the more we can do that, it will make it easier in times of difficulty to continue to lean into that even when we don't feel it. Because that is the thing with hope, at least in a therapeutic perspective, and I would argue would tie into like a faith understanding of hope, is hope is not dependent on our feelings. We don't need to feel joyous to have hope. Hope goes beyond that. So yeah, I would say that a journal is an excellent way. And I think it speaks to the passage in Philippians 4:8, which I had pulled up. I'll read that for us. It says, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." And to me, this is such a beautiful example of how we see the proof of science of neuroplasticity and how our brain is wired, and what the word teaches us about like what we think matters, and that will change our behavior. It will change our life. So when we do that inner work, when we do the emotional work and seek to grow internally, it will impact how we view the world, and how we experience the world, like on a lived level, I guess you would say.
Yeah. So the whole thing about, even as we think about these things that are true and noble, our brains, God made us in such a way that it helps grow hope, I guess, in one sense,
Yes, yes.
in who we are.
Yes, and I mentioned it earlier, but I think it's a great little nugget to hold on to, but this idea that hope breeds hope.
Yeah.
It really does, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Any closing comments that maybe we missed something or that you'd like to
Oh, I
offer?
could always talk for hours, but that's probably good for today.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that this is an excellent conversation to be having here and to be having with ourselves and our loved ones,
Yeah.
because I think it's an enriching conversation and topic, and filled with scriptural references that we can glean into to continue to grow in that way.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Appreciate that. Yeah. So I want to leave us with there's a great passage in Romans on hope. And we're looking forward to the series In Hope, Hope Rises, exploring what hope is, how to grow in hope, and also the hope that we have to offer to the world. Hope in difficulties as well. We're going to see that in a couple weeks with Jeremiah. But let me finish with this, Romans chapter 15 and verse 13. And Paul says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit." God bless. Thank you. Thank you, Breanna.
Thank you.